So I saw a really cringe-inducing interpretation of Bambietta's poem on Reddit the other day, and that compelled me to make a video where I discussed all the post-credit poems from the anime. For those unaware, most of these poems are originally from the manga. At the beginning of each volume of the manga, there's a little poem attributed to the character on the cover of that volume. So if, say, Uryu's on the cover, then the poem is about Uryu. Or rather, the poem is like from Uryu's perspective, as if he's narrating his own thoughts, so to speak. And the same applies to all the other volumes as well. So for the Thousand Year Blood War anime, they decided to take these poems and include them after the credits, taking the place of proper previews for the upcoming episodes. However, there's a lot more episodes than there are manga volumes that they're adapting for this arc, so new poems were made for the anime, including the Bambietta one that I just mentioned. So I thought it'd be neat, interesting to discuss each of them, breaking them down and trying to figure out what they mean for the character they're affiliated with. Incidentally, I will not be reaching the Bambietta one in this video because I'll save that for a separate video for Season 2's poems. Now, keep in mind I'm not fluent in Japanese, so I'm not going to go over how accurate the official translations are outside of certain cases, or even if I think the poems sound good in Japanese. I don't know anything about poetry in general, let alone Japanese poetry. I came across the terms waka and kake kotoba while writing this video, and my eyes glazed over trying to figure out what all that meant. So I will leave that to any poetry experts who want to leave their input in the comments. I'm just going to be talking about how I think the poems relate to their respective characters and any deep dive thoughts I come up with while writing the script. So let's get started. Episode 1 adapts the poem from volume 55 of the manga featuring Yhwach.
Take one step in and never return. The sea of blood of the universe.
So, right off the bat, you can see that the Japanese version starts off each line with a number. 1, 2, 3, all used as a part of a larger term, counting up to the fourth line, which does not start with the number 4, but with chi, which might be a sort of pun on she, or maybe a misdirect, I'm not sure. Anyway, the English version doesn't even bother to replicate this, but I honestly can't think of how they would be able to translate this kind of wordplay accurately. I do find it interesting that this kind of parallels the Kaiser Gesang, which is also related to Yhwach, in that it involves numbers. The Gesang uses the number 9 multiple times, 900 years, 90 years, 9 years, 9 days, which is further interesting to me because due to the Stanritter hierarchy revolving around letters, these poems involving numbers is kind of cool. I'm not sure what that signifies, but that's where my mind goes to upon seeing that. Anyway, as for the poem itself, the English translation drops the signifier the Japanese version uses to indicate that the sea of blood of the universe is the direction in which the subject is going towards. In Japanese, it makes that clear, and that a more literal translation would be something like, take one step in and never return to the sea of blood of the universe. The English version has both lines feeling like separate ideas or distinct beats. And beyond that, I'm unsure if the phrasing of the Japanese version is supposed to indicate that the subject is taking his first step towards the sea of blood of the universe, unable to return whence he came, or if the action of moving forward is going to prevent the subject from returning to the sea of blood of the universe. In either case, I feel like the sea of blood of the universe might be referring to the pre-Soul Society primordial world that existed prior to the Soul King, in which case I feel like the former reading would be more applicable, in that it's the beginning of Yhwach taking his first step towards restoring the universe to that primordial world. On the other hand, an alternative reading might be one pointing out Yhwach's dedication to keep moving forward, or rather, regression isn't something acceptable to him. The sea of blood of the universe, I hate saying that so many times, in this sense might be a more poetic descriptor of how he views his childhood, a state he refuses to return to, so he keeps pushing ahead, moving forward. But I think this interpretation takes a few more liberties than the first one. There's also the idea that Yhwach does abhor violence and death, which is ironic in that he needs to keep killing his allies to stay alive and stave off that regression I just spoke of. So with that in mind, he might just personally view the universe as it currently is as a sea of blood due to the abundance of needless strife and pointless death within it. In his eyes, returning the universe to its original state is a blessing in that it removes death, the thing he fears. So under that lens, the poem might be saying, take one step in and never return to this universe of needless slaughter and bloodshed. However you spin it, I feel the core idea is that it is showcasing Yhwach's resolve. He's going to keep pushing ahead and never go back on his words or actions. He is convinced of what he needs to do, and he views the universe as it currently is as a sea of blood. Episode 2 showcases Kilge and is adapted from Volume 56.
The soldiers blow their trumpets like stars shooting by the ear. The soldiers stomp their feet like thunder in the air.
Kilge is one of the more interesting characters in Bleach to me, among the Shenritter or otherwise, and not limited to the fact that he is one of the only Quincy's who actually fights like a Quincy. He proved himself to be highly efficient at what he does, and demonstrated why Yhwach gave him a special post among his ranks. And I feel like a lot of that bleeds into his poem, or rather, the poem helps illustrate why he is the way that he is. The English version doesn't really convey what I think the original phrasing does, though I may just be reading too deeply into it. The first two lines in Japanese read more like, "The army marches forward blowing their trumpets, the ringing is like stars in my ears." The stars in his ears bit sticks out to me as it doesn't necessarily sound like something positive. With how the guy normally acts, I'd imagine most people would expect him to revel in war and celebrate conquest, yet the poem makes me think the opposite. Describing the sounds of marching and trumpets as a ringing in his ear, like white noise or a buzzing he's just learned to get used to and block out. While he does seem to take pride in his job, I'm not sure if that's because he was always striving for his position, or if it's just due to him learning to desensitize himself to everything around him. Even in the picture of Kilge that accommodates the poem with his more listless or spiritless expression, it doesn't look like a guy who yearns for war, but rather someone who's tired of it all and simply grown to block everything else out, and is simply running on autopilot. There's this neat thing that Kilge does in the Japanese version of the manga, where some of his dialogue is replaced with this little box after he enters Vollständig, almost as if his voice is glitching out. The box acts as a substitute for whenever he uses masu in his sentences, reallocating the hiragana to where the furigana normally would go as a pronunciation guide so we still know what he's saying. You would use masu when you're trying to be formal, so him sort of glitching out whenever he tries to use it is interesting to me because it makes him appear to truly be running on autopilot. Even down to his dialogue, speaking formally because it's correct, like he's just going along with the flow mechanically, even though his heart isn't truly in it. It's also a pun on the fact that this box is pronounced masu, but that's beside the point. The English manga nor the anime do anything to adapt this weird little speech glitch, but I also don't know how they would adapt that anyway. English doesn't really do anything like furigana does, and the anime is spoken out loud. I guess they could have had a little glitch sound effect filter over his voice whenever he says masu, but then that leaves the issue of how to dub that, and I have no ideas. And beyond his Vollständig, his shrift in general being the jail kind of speaks to his sort of mechanical by-the-book nature as well. He appears to be a man who needs strict rigidity and inescapable order to operate, otherwise he wouldn't be able to go on. He's been in the trenches for way too long and the sounds of war haunt him, but they also sort of wrap around to actually being comforting to him in their familiarity and consistency. Episode 3 stars Hitsugaya.
The frost-bitten world turns to fire. A shadow of a wing remains. I try, and try again. It slips away. Shadow of a wing.
This is the first of the anime original poems, and there's not really much going on here. Just a general, I lost Hyorin Maru vibe. The frost-bitten world turning to fire might be foreshadowing for him fighting Basby, or maybe just a flowery way of expressing that without Hyorin Maru, cooling his inner world is beginning to warm up. I mean, he still has his Shikai ice powers, even without Hyorinmaru, so I'm not entirely sure how to interpret this, if it's even supposed to be that deep at all. The Japanese version is more like the ice fields have been reduced to ash, the term ice field being a direct reference to his personal spin-off chapter from years ago called Death on the Ice Field, which obviously the translators missed the reference to. So I think the focus is just supposed to be on the fact that his inner world is figuratively in disarray thanks to Hyorinmaru being abducted. I probably would have translated this to the fields of ice turn to ash. Funnily, ash is also Rangiku's power, so this could have had a neat little double meaning of how Toshiro now has to turn to Rangiku more for support because he has no Bankai, which is something we see him do later on in Season 2 when he does fight Basby. Anyway, yeah, nothing more than just Hyorinmaru's gone, and Hitsugaya is struggling with that. Episode 4 showcases Lieutenant Sasakibe.
The vow rests in the shade of the willow, even as the lightning fades.
Really straightforward. Sasakibe's loyalty to Genryusai transcends even death, and the willow being a reference to their flashback. You know, actually, Sasakibe's Bankai itself kind of resembles a willow with the pillars of lightning that drape down like a willow's drooping leaves. I don't know if that's intentional or not. It's just something I thought of while writing this. I mean, his Bankai's name references a royal villa or palace, so I've always felt like the pillars of lightning were more so supposed to look like, I don't know, those pillars and columns you see in Greek architecture, but the willow angle was kind of fun too. The second line about the lightning fading in Japanese is more like the thunder ends up somewhere distant, which is almost definitely a reference to his Bankai persisting after his death in Driscoll's possession. His thunder literally ended up somewhere distant from him, and since Bankai are a reflection of your own soul and who you are, this would wrap back around to the original idea of Sasakibe's loyalty persisting even after his death. His Bankai persists, therefore he persists, and so does his vow to Genryusai. Wish we got more of this guy in the actual series, though. The next poem is Byakuya's from volume 57. However, it's not episode 5 that adapts this, it's episode 6. The anime swap 57 and volume 58's poems around.
A petal falling, never to bloom again. A petal in flames, full of beauty.
So let me just start off by saying that I continue to believe that Kubo really did intend to kill Byakuya permanently in this arc. Because why else would his poem involve the phrase, never to bloom again? Like, that's just right there. Like, come on. Anyway, the English version fascinates me a bit because unlike the Japanese version, it actually has a subject. The Japanese version doesn't actually specify what is falling or what will never bloom again, while the English version goes with a petal. Also, the English version misses the fact that the Japanese poem is using Byakuya's Shikai command, scatter, and goes with falling instead. Like, you know, falling is technically a correct translation, but it misses the significance there, so that's kind of stupid. Anyway, I guess the mention of flames is just supposed to be because the poem after this is Genryusai's, and that's supposed to be a sort of transition. But like I said, the anime flips the order in which these poems occur, so that significance is lost there. Anyway, yeah, I'm pretty sure this poem was mainly used as a farewell to Byakuya, but Kubo changed his mind and didn't let him die, which I've always thought was a shame for over a decade now. His death scene was really good, and would have been a perfect send-off for his character, and since he doesn't actually end up doing anything really significant anyway after this point, beyond giving Rukia a pep talk and just helping fight Gerard for like 20 chapters, I don't think him actually dying here would have impacted this series in any noticeable way. Now back to episode 5's poem, which is adapted from volume 58, which focuses on Shigekuni Yamamoto Genryusai.
The heart burns, even though the rain falls.
So Genryusai's appears to be straightforward at first glance, but there is a little bit of wordplay going on that's lost in the English translation. So what he says is, the heart burns and the rain falls, but in Japanese, while he does use kokoro, which means heart, and ame, which means rain, the kanji that's used is tamashi, which means soul, and ten, which means heaven. So the text says the soul burns and the heavens fall, or the sky falls. From what I understand, ame is an actual reading pronunciation of 10, going back over 1,000 years, and even in English, saying the sky falls can kinda be just a poetic way of saying it's raining. But in universe, I also feel like, given that this poem concludes with Genryusai's death, it's also supposed to be a sort of way of saying that his death signifies the fall of the Soul Society. His defeat is ushering in the fall of heaven, so to speak. Even more so when you realize Yhwach's next step would be to infiltrate the Ryokyu, which is an even more apt analog to heaven in the Bleach universe. Meanwhile, rain has always been used as symbolism in Bleach, mainly in regards to Ichigo, who does show up right after this, and his emotional state, so tying Genryusai's demise to Ichigo's appearance is pretty fun. As for why he's pronouncing soul as heart, I'm not entirely sure. The concept of a tamashi, soul, and a kokoro, heart, in Bleach's cosmology, as well as the differences between them, is very specific, and it's something lost to a lot of overseas fans due to translations not bothering to make real distinctions between them from time to time. They usually translate them both as just soul, or both as just heart, depending on the context. For some insight, and not to take too long of a tangent, the tamashi, soul, is something that all things have, including inanimate objects, as described by Kugo Ginjo during the Fullbringer arc, and they're what Soul Reapers imprint onto Asauchi to form a Zanpakuto, but you wouldn't use the term tamashi to describe a spirit person like a Soul Reaper. They're a konpaku. A konpaku has a tamashi in them, but they are not tamashi themselves. And that becomes confusing just because both tamashi and konpaku can be translated into English as soul, which the official translations do from time to time with little to no consistency, but they are two separate things. A Soul Reaper is a konpaku, and a Soul Reaper has a tamashi within them, for example. And both of those terms are still different from the term kokoro, heart, which official translations also translate as soul from time to time, along with mind or spirit, etc., despite the heart being a term Kubo uses consistently and constantly, to the point that it's a meme that all Bleach fans should recognize as the intended translation by this point. So unlike tamashi and the above, a kokoro is more of a metaphysical idea within Bleach that a few characters here and there struggle to find a definition for, like Ulquiorra, for example. I'm sure what a heart in Bleach actually constitutes could take an entire video by itself, but to speed run through it all, in Rukia's flashbacks we see Kain defining it as a sort of connection made between people forged through emotion and understanding, which is basically what Ulquiorra ends up concluding as well, thanks to his observations of Orihime and Ichigo's actions. It's something based in emotion and not logic like Ulquiorra is more used to. Zanpakuto also have kokoro, which makes sense due to their nature of being connected to their Soul Reaper counterpart. I'm not sure if we're supposed to read into hearts within Bleach super literally, outside of a metaphorical or poetic angle, but at least in my eyes, while a tamashi is an objective component of an object's being, kokoro is what subjectively makes a person and defines their own world. Their feelings, thoughts, dreams, bonds, etc., which is why inanimate objects can have a tamashi, but not a kokoro. You only have a kokoro if you're alive. Also, there's a difference between kokoro and kokoro, which is used for hollows, but that's a whole nother tangent I'm not going to get into. All this is to say that the distinction between these terms is pretty important in understanding aspects of Bleach's writing, and so Viz Media translating kokoro, tamashi, and konpaku all as soul just makes things needlessly complicated to English fans and honestly kinda pisses me off. So back to the matter. Genryusai referring to a soul while saying it as heart probably just indicates the depth of his passion. It's not just his soul that's burning, like literally his soul is where his fire powers come from, but his actual heart, his entire essence to his core. Which is honestly probably pretty obvious and didn't need that whole breakdown for me to convey, but here we are. So this video is already 20 minutes long and I'm only halfway through this season. I didn't expect to ramble on like I currently am, so I'm gonna split this into 2 videos. Well, I guess if I do each season over 2 videos, it'll be 4 videos total. for seasons 1 and 2. If you have any thoughts of your own about how you were interpreting these poems, leave them in the comments. If you have any comments on my interpretations, comment those as well. And if you are someone that is actually fluent in Japanese and have noticed that I've made a mistake here or there, please correct me as well. Like and subscribe for more Bleach content. I make them whenever. There's no real consistency. Check out my other videos. We did an entire fan dub of Can't Fear Your Own World. Check that out. And if you're into other things like Kingdom Hearts or Final Fantasy, we also have videos about that. Thanks for watching.